Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I greet you with the salutations of peace and blessings according to Islam. And as per the traditions of the Ahmadi Muslim Jamaat, I request my dear brother Aqil Bhatt Sahib to please start this proceeding with the recitation of the Holy Scriptures of Islam, the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تكونوا كالذين كفروا وقالوا لإخوانهم إذا ضربوا في الأرض أو كانوا غزا لو كانوا عندنا ما ماتوا وما قتلوا ليجعل الله ذلك حسرة في قلوبهم والله يحيي ويميت والله بما تعملون بصير ولئن قتلتم في سبيل الله أو متم لمغفرة من الله ورحمة خير مما يجمعون ولئن متم أو قتلتم لإلى الله تحشرون فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك فاعف عنهم واستغفر لهم وشاورهم في الأمر فإذا عزمت فتوكل على الله إن الله يحب المتوكلين إن ينصركم الله فلا غالب لكم وإن يخذلكم فمن ذا الذي ينصركم من بعده وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. I shall now present the English translation of the verses that I have recited. These were taken from the Holy Quran, chapter 3, verses 157 to 161. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the rejected, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, ever merciful. O ye who believe, be not like those who have disbelieved, and say of their brethren when they travel in the land or go forth to war, had they been with us, they would not have died or been slain. This is so that Allah may make it a cause of regret in their hearts, and Allah gives life and causes death, and Allah is mindful of what you do. And if you are slain in the cause of Allah or you die, surely forgiveness from Allah and mercy shall be better than that which they hoard. And if you die or be slain, surely unto Allah shall you be gathered together. And it is by the great mercy of Allah that thou art kind towards them. If thou hadst been rough and hard-hearted, they would surely have dispersed from around thee. So pardon them and ask forgiveness for them, and consult them in matters of administration. And when thou art determined, then put thy trust in Allah. Surely Allah loves those who put their trust in Him. And if Allah helps you, none shall overcome you. But if He forsakes you, then who is there that can help you beside Him? In Allah then let the believers put their trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Jazakumullah khairan jazaa. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. It is a deep and great pleasure that we are able to host our neighbors, fellow Windsorites, and especially academia. And we are just excited tonight that everybody is here, and our doors are always open. The mosques of the Ahmadi Muslim community, we like to pride ourselves on this, that our doors are always open to everybody, regardless of sect, creed, culture, background. Every one of you is always welcomed here in the near future and anytime you want to visit us. So thank you for coming tonight. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community, I would like to just present a brief video, introductory video before we move on.
Is a dynamic, fast-growing international revival movement within Islam. Founded in 1889, the community spans more than 195 countries, with membership exceeding tens of millions. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is the only Muslim community to believe that the long-awaited promised Messiah has arrived, in the person of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, India. The promised Messiah claimed to be the metaphorical second coming of Jesus of Nazareth, and the divine guide whose advent was foretold by the holy prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him. The community believes that Allah has sent the promised Messiah to end religious wars, condemn bloodshed, and to reinstitute morality, justice, and peace for mankind. The advent of the promised Messiah has brought an unprecedented era of Islamic revival. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is the leading Islamic organization that categorically rejects any form of terrorism. Over a century ago, the promised Messiah emphatically declared that the doctrine of violent jihad goes against the teachings of the Holy Quran and the practice of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. The promised Messiah's advent has ushered in a new era of dialogue, tolerance, and prayer. The promised Messiah penned over 80 books and thousands of articles, delivering countless lectures, engaging in public debate, and prayer jewels in an intellectual, spiritual campaign to defend the true honor of Islam. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is the foremost Islamic organization with a central spiritual leader. Over a century ago, the promised Messiah reminded his followers of Allah's promise to safeguard the message of Islam through Khilafat, the spiritual institution of successorship to prophethood. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community believes that only the spiritual successorship can uphold the true values of Islam and unite humanity. 5 spiritual leaders have succeeded the promised Messiah since his passing in 1908. The 5th head of the community, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, resides in the United Kingdom. Under the leadership of its spiritual successors, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has built over 15,000 mosques, over 500 schools, and more than 30 hospitals. It has translated the Holy Quran to over 60 languages. The community propagates the peaceful true teachings of Islam through a 24-hour broadcast channel, MTA, through the community's website, alislam.org, and print, Islam International Publications. The community has been at the forefront of disaster response worldwide through an independent charity, Humanity First.
Thank you. My name is Imam Zishan Ahmed. I am the central missionary serving in Windsor, Ontario. I'm also serving as the Imam here at our mosque here. We've been very fortunate that we were all able to establish this building into a mosque. We renovated in the past few years. We've been working very hard as a community, and it is a great blessing of God that we have that. And alongside that, we have some tremendous friends that have given us support from outside of the community. I know every single one of you is familiar with Dr. John Capucci. There's a saying of the Holy Prophet, the founder of Islam, that until you're not thankful to those who surround you, the beings of God, you cannot be truly thankful to Him. So again, for your friendship, Dr. Capucci, for your support, and just enlightening our community as a whole, I would like to, on behalf of the community, thank you, and may this friendship always continue, and may it always flourish. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, I would like to also thank our National Vice President, Professor Maulana Hadi Ali Chaudhry Sahib, for attending this evening, all the way from Toronto. We also have our national president for the Ahmadi Lawyers Association. He was very interested in Dr. Capucci's lecture this evening, the subject. He's also attending, Mr. Mo Tahir. I also appreciate his attendance, and we look forward to his insight while we're continuing this evening. Just some housekeeping points. We have the ladies' washroom. The volunteers outside can guide you, and the men's washroom, of course, is on your left side. After this formal discussion or presentation from Dr. Capucci, we will be delighted to host you. Our volunteers have put together a Justice Cafe for this evening. Please do join us for some refreshments and some discussions and interfaith dialogue. That would be our honor to discuss and host you at that event also. On behalf of the Ahmadi Muslim community, we would welcome Assumption University and all of our special guests this evening. We also welcome Dr. John Capucci, and also who is the Dr. Capucci and the Stefan Jerslowski. He is the chair in Religion and Conflict and the president of Assumption University. Dr. Capucci is part of the Windsor Roman Catholic Church, and also this specific university represents the Roman Catholic Church here in Windsor. Dr. Capucci recently conducted a study which was titled Faith and Freedom, the Ahmadi Muslim Religious Experience. I would like to call upon Dr. Stephen Brooks, Professor of Political Science and member of the Chair Advisory Committee, to introduce our special speaker for tonight, and we look forward to your speech and your presentation. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to see so many folks assembled this evening. And my introduction to Dr. Capucci will be fairly brief, but I want to start by saying that I know him pretty well. He was my student 20 years ago, and I would love to be able to take credit for all that he's accomplished over the years, but alas, I can't. He and Assumption University have done it in partnership with the different faith communities in the Windsor-Essex area. So Dr. John Capucci, many of you know him already, is the Stephen Jerslowski Chair in Religion and Conflict and President of Assumption University, Windsor's historic Roman Catholic university dating from the mid-1800s. He earned his PhD in Political Science from Carleton University, an MA from Queen's University in Kingston, and an Honours BA from our local university, the University of Windsor. He focuses on the intersections between religion and politics with an emphasis on the treatment of religious minorities by the state. Dr. Capucci's refereed journal articles, and they are many for someone as young as he is, have appeared in several national and international publications, including the Bulletin for the Study of Religion, the Journal of Contemporary Anti-Semitism, Contemporary Jewry, Canadian Jewish Studies, Field Work in Religion, Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs, and the Journal of Shia Islamic Studies. In addition to what is obviously a very active research agenda over the last several years, Dr. Capucci, you wouldn't know what to look at him, has nearly 17 years of post-secondary teaching experience. Good heavens. He's also actively involved in the community, working to build bridges with various faith communities. In 2025, in fact, just a couple of months ago, Dr. Capucci was awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medal by the Government of Canada. Quite a serious award, I should say. Please join me in welcoming Dr. John Capucci.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And before I begin, I'd like to thank the organizers of tonight's evening, not only from Assumption University, but from the Ahmadi community. I know they spent a lot of time preparing and, of course, welcoming us, all of us here this evening. So I'm very thankful, and particularly to my colleague who was behind me. He's over there now. Imam Zishan, who has been a great colleague and friend, I should say, for the past 3 years. We've worked together on numerous interfaith events and activities and lectures. And, you know, I always believe that when different faith communities come together, we're truly doing God's work. And I congratulate the Imam on his leadership. As you can see, this mosque is fairly new, and it's coming a long way under his leadership. And I also extend greetings to our visitors from Toronto as well. Professor Chowdhury has come all the way down here, and I'm very thankful to them. I also like to thank the founder of this chair, Mr. Stephen Jaroslavsky, who in 2004 had a vision in the post-9/11 environment to create a chair in religion and conflict. But it's really more about religion and dialogue. And since 2004, when the chair was endowed, it has continued in that lineage. So I'm very honored to continue with that work that Mr. Jaroslavsky has put forward and the Jaroslavsky Foundation. And of course, my advisors on the Jaroslavsky board, Dr. Brooks being one of them, and the several others as well. So I'm very grateful. Tonight I'm going to give a lecture on a research project that I conducted over the past couple of, almost over a year now, I would say, at least getting the process started. And it's on the Ahmadi community. And some might be familiar of the Ahmadi community. I know there's many Ahmadis here tonight, but there's a lot that aren't familiar. And they've come out just to hear a little bit about this community and some of the religious tenets, but also the issues that they face, particularly abroad. And we're going to spend some time talking about that as we go forward. So there's a PowerPoint presentation here, and then I'm going to add as we go on. So question we have is, what does Ahmadi mean, essentially? Ahmadi is one of the branches of Islam. It's a messianic branch, and you've already saw the video that Imam Zishan showed, which kind of depicts what I'm going to be talking about very shortly. It was founded in 1889 in Qadian, which is in the Punjab region and is in India, although it's close to Pakistan as well. And its founder was an individual named Mirza Ghulam Ahmed, who I'm going to talk about later on in the lecture. He lived from about 1835 to 1908. There's about 20 million Ahmadis worldwide, maybe more. As anyone who studies religion will tell you, it's always difficult to determine the number of adherents to a particular religion because you have to measure adherence to that as well. So someone could say, I'm Catholic, and then you ask, well, do you go to church, do you do this, do you do that? And the answer is no, so then do you count them as Catholic or not? That's what scholars end up with a little bit of difficulty. And in reference to numbers in Canada, there's about 25,000, maybe more, Ahmadis. I've seen numbers from 25,000 to up to 40,000 Ahmadis around the country, and I've spoken to quite a few of them. In reference to worldwide, it's probably about 20 million, and spread across about 210 different countries. And we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. So that's a little bit about the Ahmadi community. I want to show you how it's spread out in the world. As you can see, there are 3 countries that are highlighted in dark green, and those are where the most Ahmadis are located. One of them is Pakistan, and I'm going to spend a lot of time tonight talking about Pakistan because of certain issues that we're going to get to very on. So there is a sizable community of Ahmadis in Pakistan. If you're going to ask me the question that I don't want to answer because it's a hard question to answer, how many are in Pakistan? I can't give you a right answer because I've seen multiple ranges. I've seen as low as 500,000, which I don't think is true, and then I've seen as close to about 5 million. So you can see there's a huge discrepancy, and I'll explain later on as to what the reason for that might be. Another country that has a sizable community of Ahmadis is Nigeria. Nigeria has about 2.8 million Ahmadis worldwide, followed by Tanzania with about 2.5 million. India also has a sizable population of about 1 million. And then it continues there. So the Ahmadis are also, I should note, very much involved in missionary work as well. Islam is generally regarded as a missionary religion, but the Ahmadis are very much involved in missionary work. And the Imam himself is both Imam and missionary. So you can see that there's a little bit of that as well. Now you're saying, well, I've heard of other Muslim branches. I've heard of the Sunni, I've heard of the Shia, I've heard of the Sufi. What about the Ahmadi? How do they fit into that equation? And that's a good question. In Islam, it's generally believed there are 5 pillars. The creed, which professes the belief in a monotheistic God, Allah, and the Prophet Muhammad, followed by charity, fasting, which takes place during the month of Ramadan, prayers, of course, the 5 prayers, and then, of course, the Hajj that one is expected to perform at least once in one's lifetime. The Ahmadis believe in all that, all 5 of the pillars. They also believe in all 6 of the articles of faith that all Muslims would believe in: God, prophets, judgment, divine will, angels, so on. So you're saying, okay, so they're similar to the Sunni and the Shia. So far, yes. They also believe in the Quran, and you heard this evening by Akil, who recited parts of the Quran. Again, same as the other branches as well. And those of you that are really into Islamic law or know a little bit about Islamic law, you'll notice that on the PowerPoint presentation that the branch will consult the Hanafi branch of the jurisprudential school. There's 5 jurisprudential schools in Islam, plus the Ahmadi branch, which would be 6. So, but they have their own jurisprudential school. Their motto, which is something that is very enlightening and something that I like to say a lot as well, too, and I have a pin similar to some of our Ahmadi friends: love for all, hatred for none. If you go downtown Windsor, on the waterfront, you might see a little monument that also has that inscription on. And that's something very important. It's a very beautiful motto that, of course, we should all strive to follow. So now I want to give a little bit of a history, how this branch of Islam came about. And we need to go back to India. So what was going on in India in the late 19th century or mid-19th century, as you can understand? First and foremost, the British were very much in control of the subcontinent. And there were also not only the colonial enterprises going on, but there was a lot of missionary work. And the missionary work was actually twofold. Many want to say, oh, it was the Christians. Well, partially, yes, there were the Christians that were doing missionary work in India, but at the time, there was a reform movement in Hinduism that started to come about around 1875, the Arya Samaj movement, or Noble Society. And that movement was very unique in Hinduism because it encouraged proselytization, or trying to get individuals to convert from religion X to religion Y. And that was somewhat unique for Hinduism because Hinduism tended not to do that at that time. So that group was also prominent and converting individuals, let's say, away from Islam to Hinduism or other religions as well. And of course we had the Christian missionaries as well, so this was making it very difficult for members of the Islamic faith at the time. There's some point that I want to pause on, because in Islam, and this is not just in the Ahmadi branch, but in all branches of Islam, there's a position known as the Mushaddid, which means renewer. And it's expected that every 100 years there is going to be a renewer or reformer of the faith. Someone that's going to bring back Islam to its original roots. And I want to bring that into context because that's going to play an important role in Ahmadi Islam. And you're saying, well, who are some of these renewers? As you can see, some of you that studied Islamic thought will know Al-Ghazali, of course, Salahuddin, who was obviously instrumental in the Crusades, fighting against the Crusades, Suleiman the Magnificent, who was Ottoman Sultan, Mullah Sadr Shirazi was a very prominent Shia thinker, Maududi, also a prominent Sunni thinker, although, as some of you know, not a big fan of the Ahmadis, and Ayatollah Khomeini out of Iran. So that's some of the individuals that have been seen as those centennial reformers that come once every 100 years. Now, I want to focus on the individual that is obviously central to Ahmadi Islam, and that's Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Hold on. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was born in Qadian, as I mentioned, that town in the Punjab region of India in 1835. He came from a very wealthy family that probably had their roots going back to the Mughal Empire. His father was very prominent in government at the time, and wasn't too keen on his son getting involved in religious matters. He wanted his son to kind of stay out of religion. So those of you that remember the life of St. Francis of Assisi, his father was the same kind of way. His father was very mercantile. He wanted his son to stay out of religion, and Francis didn't do that, obviously, and the rest is history. So same thing with Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He didn't want to get involved in business matters and governmental matters. Eventually he took up a clerkship in one of the towns in India. He stayed at that position for a little bit. He didn't like it at all. He was very turned off how the individuals in society were very much interested in worldly matters, in money, and position, and title, and he wasn't interested in that. He was much more interested in spiritual matters and focused his attention on that. When his father died in around 1876, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was at the age of 40. And those of you that know a little bit about Islam will know something very important about that age of 40. Does anybody know why 40 is an important number? That's right. And at that age of 40, the Prophet Muhammad also started to receive revelations. And that's the exact same thing that was happening with Mirza Ghulam Ahmad at the age of 40. So 40 is a very special number. And around that time, he publishes his magnum opus, or his major work, which takes about 4 years for him to do that. So we go on a little bit with his life, and as you can see in the next slide, he's in the center, and you've already seen a picture of him from the video that Imam Jishan played. But he's going to start take on a little bit more of an important role, rather than just kind of being a mystic figure in towards the end of the 1800s. In 1882, he claims to be a mujaddid, a reformer, one of those centennial reformers that we talked about. And then in 1889, he starts to accept pledges of loyalty of a small community of individuals, of Ahmadis. The first community of Ahmadi Muslims was probably smaller than the individuals over here. It was about 41 people. That was a small group. By the time Mirza Ghulam Ahmad died in 1908, it turned to 400,000 followers. And as you saw today, it's approaching about 20 million, if not more. This is where it gets interesting for those that have never heard of the Ahmadi tradition before. In 1891, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claims to be and takes the title of Mahdi. Mahdi is a term that has been used in Islam for centuries, and it means the awaited one, or the expected one. It's very prominent in Shia Islam. In Shia Islam, you'll see that there are 12 imams that have succeeded the Prophet Muhammad. When the Prophet Muhammad died in the year 632, there were 12 imams that followed him. The last, or the 12th imam, is the current imam, also known as Muhammad al-Mahdi, and that is the imam that lives currently. And you're saying, well, that was probably centuries ago. It was, but what Shia Islamists teach is that God elongated his life, and as a result is still the imam of the age. So Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claimed to be and took the title of Mahdi, and he also took the title of the returned Jesus, the second coming of Jesus. Now you're saying, well, there are differences. Yes, there are, but this was more in a metaphorical sense, or a symbolic sense rather than an actual sense, which I'll talk to a little bit later. And eventually in the year 1908, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad passes away in Lahore, and he's buried in Qadian. And that's where a major shrine to him still exists today. So I want to move on and talk a little bit about the successorship that followed Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the notion of Khalifa, or caliphate, as we would say in more anglicized terms. There were 5 caliphs that followed him. and they all were related to him in some way, and they all took the title Caliph of the Messiah. And there have been 5, as I mentioned already. And these individuals have guided the Ahmadi community since the beginning of this period in 1908. The current Khalifa is Mirza Masroor Ahmed, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmed, who, as Imam Jishan's video mentioned, lives in London and still guides the Ahmadi community to this day. Now, this is what's going to segue into my research. So I've given you a little bit of history, now I'm going to talk a little bit about my research. The original headquarters of the Ahmadi faith were in a place called Rabwa, which is in Pakistan. And you're saying, okay, what's the problem with that? Well, there's no problem with that per se, but there's an issue because of the faith and how the individuals and other communities see this particular faith. So that was eventually changed in 1984, and the community's headquarters moved from Rabwa, Pakistan to London, England, and that's where it is today. And I'm going to explain that next. This is a picture of His Holiness, by the way, and he's come to Canada a few times as well, met with several of the prime ministers over the years, and so have his predecessors as well. So now the research study. Last year I started writing up a research study on the Ahmadi Canadian, well, mostly focusing on Ahmadi Canadians. And what I wanted to know was their religious experience, what they endured, what they felt, what they thought about their religion. As I mentioned, they're quite sizable in the community. There's about 20 million worldwide, so it's a sizable community. And what I did was I interviewed members of the Ahmadi community. And the interview didn't take too long, it was about 25 minutes. If individuals were really interested, they talked to me for an hour, and that was good too. I learned a lot in the process. So individuals needed to A, identify as Ahmadi, B, live somewhere in Canada, and of course be at least 18 years old, which is a Research Ethics Board guideline. And those who participated received a $20 gift card. And I want to say something about the $20 gift card. Typically when you're doing Research Ethics Board applications, you always have to give some kind of compensation to the participants in the study. And I remember Imam Jishan and I had a conversation at Tim Hortons about this. And he said to me, Dr. John, the community is not going to take the money. To them, it's important that our religion is showcased, and it's an honor for us. We're not going to take the money. And the Imam actually is right, and I'm wrong. But I was very interested to note that, and something that is considered for the future. In reference to demographics, so we know what kind of sample size we have. Originally we planned for about 30 one-on-one interviews, which is considered somewhat a lot if they take a long time to do. There are about 26 males, 7 females. The average age was 39, so it's a younger sample. They ranged from ages 19 to 69, so you have a good range in that. Many of them, I would say the majority of them originated from Pakistan. Some were born in Canada, some were born in the UAE, in Dubai, and I believe there was one from Bangladesh. So that was expected that the majority would be in Pakistan. And reference to their education, it ranged from elementary school all the way up to medical and doctoral levels. The average average number of years in Canada was 19. So it indicates that this sample is relatively new to Canada, and as you'll see in the study, there's a reason why for that. So what I asked the participants was to describe which country they think is the most hostile towards Ahmadis and why, and which country they see as the most supportive to Ahmadis and why. And when I asked this question, some scholars and individuals probably said, you probably will know the answer before you ask. Yes, but first of all, we can't assume. Second of all, I need to hear the reasons for that. And that's where you start to hear a lot of these very sad stories that have come out, unfortunately. So in the answer to the question, which country was the most hostile, and the answer was Pakistan, hands down. Every single participant in the study named Pakistan as the most hostile towards the Ahmadi community. And I asked why. And there are many reasons for it, and I will get into it. But one of these issues is that persecution against the Ahmadis is legislated. You're saying, well, what does that mean? Well, if we go back to the constitution in Pakistan, there was a reform amendment in 1974, and I'll get to that. It puts Ahmadi Muslims outside of Islam. that they are not Muslims in the eyes of the Pakistani government and the eyes of other governments as well. And I'm going to get to that later on. So participants talked about legislative persecution. This is something that's enshrined not only in the Constitution of Pakistan, but also, unfortunately, in the Criminal Code of Pakistan. And that brings a lot of problems, which I'm going to get to very shortly. So the individuals in the study talked about what happened in 1974, which I'm going to talk to in the next slide, what happened in 1984, which was a major blow to the community, and even later on in 1986. You're going to know that there was a lot of massacres that happened to the Ahmadi community throughout its history. When Pakistan was formed, just shortly after 1953, there was something called the Lahore riots. And the Lahore riots were largely an objection that the Ahmadis had occupied so-called high positions in government and high positions in the military, and as a result needed to be stopped. So what the protesters wanted to do was to have the government put a constitutional ban declaring them non-Muslims so they couldn't occupy these positions. In fact, the foreign minister at the time was Ahmadi, and that was a particular point of contention between the protesters and the Ahmadi community, that they didn't want him involved. He later went on to become president of the General Assembly of the United Nations. But anyways, the massacre in Lahore in 1953, I believe there were 2,000 Ahmadis that were murdered. And that was the largest to date, if I'm not mistaken. So you're saying, well, what is causing all this tension here in Pakistan? And I'm going to get to that actually next. As I mentioned, the 1953 massacre, it didn't really work out for those against the Ahmadis. Although the Ahmadis lost quite a bit of individuals, 2,000 individuals died. But what eventually happened was that in 1974, the Bhutto government, the father, not the daughter, came forward with legislation that would declare Ahmadis non-Muslim. So if you look at the Pakistani constitution, and what they did is they added essentially a addendum towards the end of it, Article 260, and I have it right here. And he said, what it says very clearly, it says, non-Muslim means a person who is not Muslim and includes a person belonging to Christian, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, or Parsi, Parsis are Zoroastrians, or, here it is, a person of the Qadiani group or the Lahori group who call themselves Ahmadis or by any other name, or a Baha'i, or a person belonging to any of the scheduled castes. Now, that word, Qadiani, is an insultive word to use. It's a derogatory term, and it's used by individuals who are not fans of the Ahmadi community. It's used very much derisively. So, for example, one Ahmadi scholar that I was reading compared it to calling a Catholic a papist. If you were to call a Catholic a papist, at least in Elizabethan England, it was offensive. Today, probably people wouldn't know what you're talking about, but if they did, they would find it offensive because it signifies that you worship the Pope. So Qadiani is also a very offensive term, and unfortunately it's used as a slur around the world. And that's something that has been placed in the Constitution, unfortunately, of Pakistan since 1974. Now, you're saying, okay, what else happened? Well, that was just the beginning. 1974, unfortunately, for the Ahmadi community was just the beginning. 1984, things got significantly worse, and this is where a lot of my participants were talking about what has happened. In 1984, the general/dictator Zia came to power and decided to amend the penal code of Pakistan. And he did it first with an ordinance. So he gave it was essentially martial law. Ordinance XX, Ordinance 20. And that is, when you talk to Ahmadis, they know exactly what you're talking about when you say Ordinance 20, because they know what that signifies and how comprehensive and damaging it is to the Ahmadi communities. So what is essentially part of Ordinance 20? It essentially forbids Ahmadis to pose or parade around as Muslims. So they cannot call themselves Muslims. I'm just going to jump to the next slide to give you a list of what my participants have told me. And it's quite bad. And I'll even give you another example that I heard that even is kind of a bystander issue. So if you look at the 1984 ordinances, the laws, it's pretty law. First of all, they're not allowed to use Islamic greetings. So if I were an Ahmadi in Pakistan and I were to say Assalamu alaikum, that's 3 years in jail and a fine. That's it. Even if I were to say to Imam Zishan, as a Catholic going to Pakistan, and I were to say to him Assalamu alaikum, he could be arrested because I, as a Catholic, said that to him because I was under the impression that he was Muslim and I said that. That's how draconian these laws can be. That's just one. They're forbidden to give their children any Muslim names, or even if they're sending invitations out and they will say, you know, a verse from the Quran, they're forbidden to do that for weddings or even funerals as well, and I'll get to something about that. Anything that, any Ahmadi literature, you saw when you came in the mosque, there was some Ahmadi literature, you know, who are the Ahmadis, what are the Ahmadis, that's all forbidden. Anything like that, any Qurans that are in possession by Ahmadis could result in jail time as well. So if you had a Quran in your house and the Pakistani authorities saw it, there's 3 years in jail at least and a fine, okay? During the, after the holy month during certain parts in the Islamic calendar, there's a sacrifice of a goat, the qurbani. That is forbidden. If Pakistani authorities find you with a goat, they're going to think that you're going to make the sacrifice, and as a result, you're going to get arrested for that too. Even going to university or college, and we talked about academia early on today, you can't identify as an Ahmadi or else there's going to be trouble to be paid. Even voting restrictions, voting laws are in place as well that prevents Ahmadis from voting or identify. If you want to vote, you have to essentially denounce your beliefs. And I will read the language that's used. One of the, I'd say probably the most dangerous group within the Ahmadi community, for dangerous for them I should say, is those who've converted to Ahmadi Islam. They are in extreme danger in Pakistan. And one participant was telling me a story. She said that when they found out that we converted, my family converted, they went to the mosque and they, on the loudspeakers, and I kind of recognize that I'm also on a loudspeaker right now, and broadcast throughout the mosque that this family converted and we need to go to their house and we need to take care of them. So that family had to flee, because if not, they would have been dead. And a lot of the attacks on the Ahmadis in Pakistan and throughout the world is done in the streets, unfortunately. And when police come on the scene, they're always too late. And if somebody says, well, this person did anything, they might bring the person in, say, there wasn't enough evidence, we can't really do it. I see we have an officer here today, and obviously things are a lot different. But you can imagine how things work over there. Demotions, refusal to promote people because they're Ahmadi. Just think about that today. Well, we can't promote that person from assistant professor to associate. Why not? Well, he's an Ahmadi. Can you imagine saying that in Canada today? What kind of trouble would happen? But that's what goes on. And I mentioned another sad and very despicable thing is the destruction and desecration of Ahmadi cemeteries and graves. That's happened. Even after attacks on the Ahmadi community, that's also happened. And there have been countless mob attacks, as I've already mentioned. There have been terrorist attacks and murder in the street. What usually happens is they're done by motorcycles. So motorcycles will come in, shoot somebody, fly off. And then when the police come on the scene, they say, well, what can we do? Can't do anything. I don't know who the person was, it's a motorcycle. Pakistan has got 252 million people. I don't know who did what. So that's what's going on in Pakistan. At least that's some of what's going on. There's a lot more, and which is very sad, unfortunately. I want to mention something else, too. And I'm just going to go back to the previous slide. The 1986 laws about blasphemy. This was another attempt by the Zia government to limit the abilities of the Ahmadi community and essentially attempt to root them out completely. So what the blasphemy laws did, his revision did to the blasphemy laws in '86 was say that anyone who committed blasphemy had to get capital punishment, that it was required that the person be put to death. So as you can see, this is a government who has spent much time persecuting a very small minority. And you're saying, well, what's the issue here? I'm not getting it exactly. I should point out something else, that if you wanted to apply for a citizenship card in Pakistan, and I have an application, not that everyone's going to fill it out tonight, I'm not saying that, but they ask a question, they ask religion later on. And you have to check one of the boxes. And they have Muslim, Christian, Qadiani, of course, Hindu, Parsi, Sikh, Buddhist, others. And then they ask you to do an attestation. And I'm going to read it verbatim. It says, I solemnly affirm that I believe completely and unconditionally in the finality of the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and that I am not a follower of any person who claims prophethood on the basis of any interpretation of this word. Neither I believe such a claimant to be a reformer or prophet, nor do I belong to any Qadiani or Lahori group or call myself Ahmadi. In order to get that citizenship card, you need to check that box, which is essentially renouncing your faith in order to do that. If not, you're not going to get a citizenship card, you're not going to get a passport or anything of that nature. So it is quite serious. And that's why many of the Ahmadi community members have had to emigrate from Pakistan and other parts of the world too, it's not just Pakistan, to countries like Canada and the United Kingdom and Australia and so on. I mentioned other countries too. There are, my participants, they mentioned several other countries where there were some issues. First and foremost, I gave at the beginning of tonight's lecture, one of the 5 pillars is the Hajj. The question is, how do you perform the Hajj, which is in Saudi Arabia, modern-day Saudi Arabia, if you're an Ahmadi? I talked to one of the participants and I said, well, how do you do it? And he says, well, you can never use your Pakistani passport if it has lists Ahmadi on it. You have to use, let's say, your Canadian one, or American, or Australian, or UK one. Because if the Saudi authorities find out, there's going to be trouble. So it's kind of like you don't tell them that you're a Muslim and you leave it at Muslim. And they are. You don't start volunteering information like that because there could be quite a bit of trouble. There's also some issues that have happened in Bangladesh. Bangladesh has also had some problems with attacking, at least mobs attacking Ahmadis. Recently, there was 2 that were killed. And Burkina Faso, a few years ago, 2023, and actually Imam Zhishan was in the Windsor Star because there was a memorial for the victims. There were 9 Ahmadis who were murdered. Point blank, they were elders of a mosque, just like this, for refusing to renounce the Ahmadi faith, and they were killed there and then. So this is what goes on, unfortunately, in some parts of the world. Now, a little bit of the highlight. So that's the bad side of the story. What's the good side of the story? Well, I asked them, which country is the most hostile? But then I said, which country is the most supportive? Well, I'm very pleased to report to you tonight that according to my participants, the most supportive country is hands down a little country by the name of, it's Canada. And I'm very proud of that. Many of them noted that Canada was very welcoming and has been very welcoming, particularly after 1984 and then as the years went on, to accept refugees and asylees from Pakistan. The government, obviously, of Canada does not oppose any restrictions on the Ahmadi community. If the Ahmadi community wants to build mosques and have Qurans and have interfaith events with Catholic universities, they can do that and there's no problems. So that was something that I was personally very proud of. And also the Ahmadi community in Canada has also been very supportive of many charitable causes, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But that's something that's drawn a lot of pride from Canadians across the board, and also from political figures as well. Many of the Ahmadi community members have met with political figures, prime ministers and premiers and so on and so forth. So it's something to be very proud of. I want to talk a little bit about what the participants noted, and I actually found pictures to support what they were saying. As you can see in this picture over here in the far left, you have a mosque that's decorated in all kinds of Canadian paraphernalia. The Ahmadi community, I have to say, really loves Canada Day. It's a big deal for the Ahmadi community. I'm very proud about that, by the way. Canada Day is a very important day for the Ahmadi community, and it's something that should be important to everyone. Another activity the Ahmadis are very much involved in is blood drives in support of their communities. Very much supportive in helping their communities with that. In the bottom you can see the former Prime Minister meeting with His Holiness as well. His Holiness has come many times to Canada, and his predecessors as well, in support of the Canadian Ahmadi community and to Canada as well. There's also they'll do a Run for Windsor or something of that nature. And there was quite a bit of money raised for, I believe, one of the local hospitals in that. So the Ahmadi community is very much involved. There was a toy drive for those in need as well. So I'm very proud, and I'm sure the Ahmadi community should be commended for their works in support of Canada. That leads me to another point, which is less about the practical, more about the theological. The Ahmadis have always taught that you have to be loyal to the country in which you reside, whatever that country is. If you reside in the United States, you got to be loyal to the US. If you reside in Canada, you got to be loyal to Canada. And the Ahmadis are they take pride in doing that and making sure that they're loyal to the country that they're living in, and that makes sense, right? Other countries that were seen as very supportive were the United Kingdom, obviously. The United Kingdom was very kind because in 1984, when General Zia started promulgating all those laws against the Ahmadis, it was the United Kingdom who welcomed His Holiness, the Khalifa, into London. And the community still resides there today. So that's something to be very proud of as well. The participants also talked about Germany. Germany has a very sizable Ahmadi community, about around 40,000, more than Canada and more than the United States. So obviously what's going on in Germany is something that's resonating with the community. And other communities mentioned were the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and even countries where Ahmadis have a large missionary work, like Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, also were recognized as very supportive of the Ahmadis. So now you're saying, okay, I kind of get this, but you haven't explained to me why. Why do we have all these problems with the Ahmadis? Why does Pakistan and other governments have all these issues and problems with the Ahmadis? What is it? It boils down to really two issues. It depends on how you want to look at it. One for sure, and then the other one is probably another issue too, but maybe not as much as the first issue. And I've listed them right there. One is the notion of the seal of the prophets, which I'm going to spend some time on, and another one is the issue related to Jesus. So I asked participants, I asked them, why is the community, do you think the community is facing opposition? And they said, well, it boils down to two issues, and they explained it very clearly. So in Islam, there is a teaching called the seal of the prophets, which is the notion that Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, is the final prophet. And that is accepted by Sunni Muslims, and that's accepted by Shia Muslims, that he is considered the final prophet, hence the term seal. That is something that the Ahmadis will say, we believe that, but we have to add a little bit of a footnote to that, okay? So what Mirza Ghulam Ahmad believed and confessed, in the sense that he conveyed to the community, was that he believed he was a prophet of Islam. But, this is where, individuals haven't listened to the but part of the story. He is a subordinate prophet to the Prophet Muhammad. So I'm going to say that again. Prophet Muhammad is here, and then Mirza Ghulam is a subordinate prophet to the Prophet Muhammad. Two reasons for that. One, he was not a law-bearing prophet. He didn't bring a new revelation in the idea that Muhammad brought the Quran or that Jesus brought the Gospels. He didn't bring any laws. His goal was essentially, which is my second point, to renew Islam, to bring Islam back to the original foundations that the Prophet Muhammad had. So as one of my senior scholars and colleagues, Dr. Gualtieri, studied, Dr. Gualtieri was a professor at Carleton University many years ago. And actually, when I first did my research on the Shia Muslim community, he was the chair of the Research Ethics Board. And then it's funny that all those years later, I would take up a study that he did, and he was considered one of the top Canadian scholars on the Ahmadi community. And as you can tell by his last name, he was Italian too, so it seems to be an Italian thing, I don't know. But he wrote, and he gave an excellent summary of all this. He says, and he by the way, he traveled to Pakistan in the 70s and 80s when it was a challenge to do it. But he wrote, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is a subordinate prophet without a law and without a book. He didn't bring a new Sharia, a new Islamic law, and he didn't bring a new Quran or a new revelation. He was subordinate to the Prophet Muhammad. So this is what Ahmadis believe in. The issue that has happened is that countries around the world one of them, of course, is Pakistan, but there's several others, believe that no, Ahmadis are saying and insulting the Prophet Muhammad by saying that there's another prophet who's better than the Prophet Muhammad. And Ahmadis have never, never, never said that at all. But that is what the belief is. Now you're saying, Dr. Brooks mentioned, both of us are political scientists by trade. You're saying, well, why would they do something like that? Well, when you look at studying religion, I tell you, you usually uncover politics. And it's always political issues. And it's simple in this case. It's not something new. It's unfortunate, but it's not new. You need someone to blame in a country, always. You need someone to blame. And in this case, the Pakistani authorities and other governments around the world have chosen to use the Ahmadis as a scapegoat. So instead of focusing on things in Pakistan that are of importance, let's say the literacy rate, by the way, the literacy rate in Pakistan is around 50-something%, with under 50% of women being literate. So that's between the ages of 15 and up. There's also, they have one of the highest terror index ratings in the world. They're number 2, by the way. Burkina Faso is 1, and Pakistan is number 2. And corruption rates are one of the highest in the world. Their freedom levels are one of the lowest in the world, particularly when it comes to internet as well. I think they were rated 27 out of 100, which is one towards the bottom. So they have all these issues. But instead of focusing on those issues, we want to talk about the Ahmadis. And unfortunately, that has been the problem, the scapegoating of it. And also you have elements within Pakistani society that are very much radical, and they want to target this particular group. And the government goes along with it, right, in order to kind of have an alliance. Again, politics. Sad, but that's unfortunately the nature of it. And they were a little bit nervous to point it out. They prefaced this with, because they knew that I was Christian, so they kind of looked at me and they said, should I say this or not say this? And I kind of felt it, but I said, go ahead, I have no problem with what you're going to say. And they said, well, the other issue that we get a lot of trouble from is our belief in Jesus. And I said, okay, go ahead. I'm not offended at all. I'd be the last one to be offended. So let's talk about general Muslim beliefs on Jesus. In Islam, Jesus is believed to be a prophet, a very prominent one, by the way. And but Muslims do not believe Jesus was crucified. So it's kind of unclear, and some scholars differ, but he was taken off from the cross and essentially assumed into heaven, both body and soul. Similar to the Assumption of Mary, if you want to look at it that way. I know there's a few Catholics in the audience, at least I hope there are, that would know a little bit about that. So that's the Sunni and Shia opinion on Jesus. Ahmadis and Christians are actually going to be on the same page for a few seconds. They both believe that Jesus was crucified and endured the crucifixion. In the case of the Christians, Jesus died, was buried, and resurrected on the third day. That's Orthodox Christianity. Ahmadis believe Jesus was on the cross and then was in a swoon, so kind of like a daze. Was placed in the tomb and then managed to survive the crucifixion. And after that, he decided to leave Jerusalem, the area of Jerusalem, and walked eastward in search of the 12 lost tribes of Israel. And he eventually landed in Kashmir, modern-day Kashmir, in a very small town, which still exists today, Srinagar in Kashmir. And he lived to a venerable old age and was buried, and his tomb is in Kashmir. So because of that, you're saying, okay, let's back up here. What's the concern with that? Well, because the Ahmadis do not believe in what other branches would believe in, Muslim branches, there's tension between them on that front as well. Now, many have asked me, they say, Dr. John, what do the Christians say? And I said, I don't think the Christians know. So that's okay, right? But anyways, that's another point of issue too, because they're challenging the idea of Jesus. But the issue that many Muslims would have who are non-Ahmadi Muslims is that Jesus is expected to come back, the second coming. There is that idea of the second coming. Whereas Ahmadis believe, no, Jesus is not going to come back. But other Muslims believe he will come back. So there's this tension on theology here with regard to Jesus. And by the way, this is the shrine, the Rosabal shrine in Kashmir. if you're interested, you're more than welcome to visit it, I guess. But so that's a little bit of the points of contention, mostly with the seal of the prophets, but also with the position on Jesus. Another third one that I didn't put in the slide because I recognize I didn't want to be here all night, and I didn't think people wanted me to be here all night, was the Khalifa, the position of Khalifa. In Islam, there historically has been a caliphate. We all know that. Shia Muslims will have some different opinions on that, but historically there has always been one, at least historically in the early part. But the idea that it continues into the modern era has been challenged. And some of the participants said that they get a lot of flack for that. Or when they're being, chastised or yelled at in their community, in the greater Muslim community, they'll usually say something unflattering, either about Mirza Ghulam Ahmad or the current Khalifa. And the next question I asked participants, so I said, what kind of praise do you get about your tradition, your faith? And there was quite a bit, which I was happy to hear. One was loyalty to the country. Many Ahmadis said that we get a lot of praise because we're loyal to the country, we participate in events in the country, we want to welcome our fellow Canadians into our community. The motto, of course, love for all, hatred for none, is a beautiful motto. And this was mentioned in the Imam's video, the jihad of the sword. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad has essentially dispensed with that idea of the jihad of the sword. There is no more jihad of the sword. There is no more violence in the name of religion. Instead, you have jihad of the pen instead. That if you have issues against a religious tradition or somebody, you don't use your fists or sword, you use your mind and your writings in order to disagree with someone. And that's something that's very important to Ahmadis, and something that, in my opinion, should be very much commended. Obviously, there are humanitarian and charity efforts, a lot of humanitarian efforts. Another aspect, and I'll show you the next PowerPoint here, is the gentleman with the garbage bags. He's cleaning up after New Year's. One of the Ahmadi community does a lot of cleanup after New Year's Eve on New Year's Day. Because I understand in Canadian and American society, people get a little festive on New Year's Eve. I don't know if that's true or not, yeah? And they throw all kinds of ticker tape stuff and all that. I know the police have to deal with all that, at least before, but not the after part. So the Ahmadis have taken it upon themselves to do the cleanup. And they're very, very proud of that work, and they should be. It's something, and something that I commend personally to the Ahmadi community. And this is what's really attracted me to the Ahmadi community, is their interfaith dialogue work. I have to say it's one of the best I've seen. And every semester, the local Ahmadi Muslim Student Association at the University of Windsor will put on a panel, and it's a panel of various religious figures, Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, Jewish, even atheist and agnostic and humanist have come out. And they sometimes even get one Catholic that comes out once in a while. But you can see that they're always very welcoming to these. And they have not a debate, but more of a discussion about the similarities between the traditions. One was on religion and science. One was on happiness. We can all agree on happiness. We want to be happy. And they put on a dinner as well, and it's something very impressive to see. So as I said, I'm someone who's very keen on interfaith dialogue. I commend the Ahmadis for their work on interfaith dialogue. They're even starting to rival a local Catholic university that shall remain nameless on that. So. But now you're saying, okay, well, John, everything can't be roses, and you're right. Not everything is going to be roses. There are some issues here. What about discrimination? And I asked the participants, have they faced discrimination in Canada? And the answer, unfortunately, is it's a little bit mixed, I have to say. The question really kind of produced two different answers. So there was those who never felt anti-Ahmadi persecution, but they did feel Islamophobia or anti-Muslim sentiments from individuals. So you had to really extract the two, right? And that was the challenge as the researcher, that was the challenge that I had to face. So there were some that said, they felt anti-Muslim discrimination because they're Muslim, not because they're Ahmadi. That probably the perpetrator didn't even know what Ahmadi meant or what any of the Islamic branches meant. But others have said, they've had to deal with some issues. Some of them have been very heated, and language have been used, and cursing, unfortunately, and even boycotts. But many of them pointed out that, for example, I'll show you a slide here, the anti-Muslim one. So I'll just read it. Not from being Ahmadi, but from being Muslim. It was a mixture of microaggressions and dismissive attitude. My employers, when I asked for Fridays off for mosque, he would tell others that I was going to smoke a shisha. Okay? So you get things like that are ridiculous but still offensive nonetheless. And this one, yes, since I was a young boy, I lived through the time of 9/11. At that young age, you didn't know what was going on. We were persecuted and couldn't go to school for an entire week. My sister's hijab was thrown off. So again, you see these kinds of things happening. It's not anti-Ahmadi per se, but it's very much anti-Muslim. Now, you're saying, well, what about the anti-Ahmadi? That did come through as well quite a bit in Canada, unfortunately. And examples, during my university years, I was part of AMSA, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Student Association. I had a friend, as soon as he found out I was Ahmadi, he stopped talking to me. That was very common in the research results. Whether, for example, somebody mentioned about social media, I remember in the interviews, and they said, once they found out I posted some nice comment about the Ahmadi community, they stopped following me on whatever social media platform they were using. So again, you could see these kinds of microaggressions happening. Or the next one, this person actually didn't talk about having any kind of incidents, but it was all fear. The person said, not a discrimination, it was my own internal fear. You don't reveal your Ahmadi to Pakistani Muslims in Canada. It's all because of the baggage that I'm carrying from my homeland. When I joined my office 3 years ago, I came out to my colleagues. It didn't matter to them though. In other words, there's still this baggage, this carryover that's coming from, let's say, Pakistan or other countries where Ahmadis aren't tolerated, and individuals are saying, well, what if I say to so-and-so that I'm an Ahmadi? What's going to happen? Are they going to stop being my friend? Are they going to try to get me fired? That's happened. Unfortunately, I had to hear that individuals try to get another individual fired because they were an Ahmadi. This was Canada. This wasn't anywhere else. So again, those politics, unfortunately, are coming over. And this one is the last one was really sad because it happened to the person at a young age, probably 10. I was grade 5. I had some friends who asked me my sect, and I said I was just a Muslim. They said you have to be a sect, Sunni, Shia, whatever. And I asked my parents, and they told me. I told my friend, and they told their parents, and their parents told their kids that you're not the right type of Muslims. I invited them over to an event, and they declined, saying that they want to brainwash people. Again, it might not be the young generation, the so-called generation, the millennials or the Generation Z, but it might be the parents that are bringing that over and saying, oh, you can't talk to them, they're Ahmadis. What are Ahmadis? Well, you just stay away from them. If you know what's good for you, you stay away from them. Unfortunately, that's happened. And even, unfortunately, I had to read these, listen to these things. It's sad to hear for me, but there was a couple cases where there were two people, youngsters dating, and when one of the parents found out that the other, I don't know if it was the male or the female, but one of them was Ahmadi, that relationship got cut off. The parents said, there's no way you're going out with him. He's Ahmadi, you better stay away from him. He's going to convert you, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, and everything in between. And that's unfortunate because they're young and in love, and you want that, right? But unfortunately, that was carried over into this. And one last point, and then I'll take a few minutes for questions, is what I've noticed is what some scholars will call the internalization of otherness. And it's a very fancy word to say that when I was interviewing the Ahmadis, a lot of them said the mainstream Muslims. And I wrote that down, and I put a star in my notes. I said, okay. In other words, if they're kind of identifying them, if everyone else is mainstream, then what does that make you? Alternative? That you're not in the mainstream? That you're, or some of them would say that the traditional Muslims, and that makes you untraditional. So there seems to be this idea that all that's been said about the Ahmadis is starting to fall inside, right? It's starting to take root inside, and that's an issue that I want to pursue in my paper as well as I go forward in this research project, is to see how the Ahmadis see themselves as others, as off onto the periphery, unfortunately. There's Catholics and then there's Christians. I said, no, there's Christians and there's a period, that's it. But this internalization of being an other seems to be something that's, at least in the narrative, is what I can see so far. So that's a little bit about my presentation. And I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have going forward. Thank you.